Welcome to another InWheelTime podcast. This is the world's favorite place to go for all things automotive. Pardon me, Jack. I know you've got a podcast too, and we love you. It's the InWheelTime Car Talk Show. He's up early, waiting for Santa, our go-to expert, author, and guy who gets an audience with the King of England, Jack Nerad, ladies and gentlemen, standing by in the green room. Jeff has the racing calendar. Mars has This Week in Auto History, and I'll get you caught up on the stories making automotive news headlines. Howdy, along with Mike out of this world, Mars. We always need more Jeff Zekin. I'm Don Armstrong. Glad you could join us today. David Ainsley will be joining us a little bit later on. Well, we're going to join all the way out to Southern California, and Mr. California himself.
Yep.
He's got the tan. He's got the look. He's got the convertible. Ladies and gentlemen.
And the surf's up, dude.
From America on the Road, it's Jack Nerad.
Right.
We love you, man.
Morning.
Hey, what an introduction. Incredible. Really incredible. I do appreciate it.
Well, we love you and think the world of you and your knowledge when it comes to cars. And, we talk to you often. And I quote you many times. Hey, Jack Nerad thinks kind of like I do on this. You know, the buttons here, the buttons there. We don't like those buttons there. We don't know how they work or whatever the case may be. And it's interesting to talk to you because you kind of are right in tune with me. I mean, look. Every car.
I must be a really smart guy, right?
Yeah, well, either that or the other way. I'm not sure, but no, I
think that's true. I think you're a very bright guy, and we agree on most everything.
Well, people ask me all the time. So, what's the favorite car? I really don't have a favorite per se. I mean, let's drill it down. You're looking for a small, a subcompact, an SUV, a truck, whatever it is. Let's talk then. But for the most part, manufacturers do a pretty good job when it comes to the tens of thousands of parts that they assemble and put on the road. And, you compare today's vehicle to, let's say, a 1980s vehicle or a 1990s vehicle.
A Yugo.
Not that. But, you get the point. I mean, every manufacturer, if every car were perfect, we wouldn't have things like NHTSA and recalls and that sort of stuff.
Repair shops.
Yeah, but I don't think there is such a thing as an absolutely perfect car. But there are some that are better than others, and even the good ones make mistakes sometimes. And
I absolutely agree. When I started in this business, there were some truly bad cars.
Yes,
I mean. Just stay away from them, rust buckets almost immediately, just terrible handling, totally unreliable. We just don't see that anymore. From any manufacturer, the price of admission is very high quality, and I think that's a good thing, obviously.
Yeah, I do too. And there's a lot of fierce competitors out there in the car industry. And, one guy does one thing, and they go, that's pretty good. We're going to put that into play in our next redesign, which could be 5 and in some cases 10 years down the road.
Yeah, it's true. I write a lot of comparison tests for jdpower.com. And in doing these tests, it's really fascinating to see how closely aligned competitors are. Because in terms of interior space, in terms of trunk space, in terms of horsepower, in terms of just what they offer, these competitors are just almost on top of each other, could put the same hat on all of them pretty much. And it just shows exactly what you're talking about, how immensely competitive this industry is and how manufacturers work really hard and look at their competitors every day.
Well, back when cars were being built by just the big three rather than all the imports and everything overseas, they used to say don't buy a car built on Monday or a Friday. And that held true for a long time. And I think by having these businesses and these companies that regulate that, kind of thinned the herd on that. And then you got the abundance of all the imports and then the building overseas. So I think having those organizations kind of calmed it down to where we are today.
Yeah, I mean, they put the level of the playing field is much better today than it was just a few years ago, as a matter of fact.
Yeah, and I think my former boss, Dave Power, who I worked for a couple of years, really changed the industry and did exactly what Jeff's talking about. I mean, it kind of held every manufacturer's foot to the fire and let people see what quality was really like. And it's changed the industry pretty significantly.
Well, speaking of quality, I do the recalls every week, and I look at some of them, and it just major glaring mistakes that have been made. But one of the things that comes to mind is, first of all, who designed the item that's being put onto the car? And I'm not talking about engines and transmissions, that sort of thing, but all of the other stuff that's on there, those are designed and manufactured by suppliers to the automotive industry. What kind of standards that the manufacturer places on the supplier, we don't know. That seems to be a big mystery. And what kind of a penalty do the manufacturers place on the supplier when they have, for instance, the airbag thing? Oh my God. I mean, that was industry wide, and it seems like everybody was doing Takata airbags. And I think that certainly has changed since then, but put Takata out of business. And where does the industry stand today when it comes to first designing the part? Here's the part we want you to design. How much is it going to cost us to build it? Do they always go for the cheapest? Or do they look back and say, they don't have many recalls on the stuff that they make. Let's spend a few more dollars on this particular part. We're going to pass it on to the buyer anyway, and we won't have to mess with it, and gives us a good rating.
Yeah, I think they're getting there. What you find out when you look, under the hood and everything is that so many manufacturers use the same suppliers. So you see very common systems across various vehicles out there. In some ways, that's good, because if it's a reliable system, it's great that it's on multiple vehicles. But at the same time, if you have a situation like the Takata airbags, where they're across many, many brands, but they're kind of disastrously bad, you got a big problem.
Well, the one that's working right now, and has been now for over a year, is the backup cameras on a lot of different manufacturers' cars. And you know darn good and well that that's got to be the same manufacturer.
Yeah, absolutely true. And as you know, testing cars every week, talking about cars, some of those backup cameras and the displays of those backup cameras are a lot better than others. They're higher fidelity. What always amazes me, and I do this every week because I test a car in America on the road every week, is how different the guidelines are. Like, what are those guidelines actually showing me? Is that the edge of my car? Is that where the tires are? Is that kind of thing when you're backing up is kind of good to know, but it's different across various
particularly
brands.
If it's got green lines and yellow lines that are side by side. Which one? I know green's good, but how bad is yellow? It's
right. The one thing is, speaking of that, and it's a silly little thing, but it also shows you at which angle your front tires are pointed.
Yes,
and helps you get back into a parking spot perfectly if you use it.
Yeah. I mean, a lot of times it's easier to back into a parking spot than it is to pull into a parking spot these days.
Yes.
Oh, absolutely.
You have that guidance for you.
Well,
and you can't see the front edges of your vehicle.
That's right.
Right.
So what comes to mind, I have to ask you this, the Stellantis thing. And somebody has finally said, hey, Carlos, not so much anymore. I know that you're planned on another year of torture for all of us, but bye-bye. And so what's going to happen to Stellantis now? I know that Elkan, the CEO of Stellantis, is looking for a CEO. First of all, let me ask you this, and this goes really across every corporation in America. Why is it that they pick somebody, pay him $1 bajillion to ruin a major manufacturer like Stellantis? Why?
It's a really good question. I'm not sure that was the goal.
Yeah, really.
Was it one of the hiring
they pick
criteria?
people with track records. I think they might look a little deeper into track records sometimes, because we see some executives go from car company to car company, leaving disaster in their wake every time they go, but they seem to fall up.
Yep.
We've seen that with several executives. So I don't know whether they talk a good ball game or what actually is happening there. But and this is a very, very difficult industry to negotiate. There's no doubt about that. There's the winds blow different ways. I mean, look at the changes we're liable to see in regulations now, where in some ways maybe going slow on EVs, what Toyota has done, and frankly what Stellantis has done, might be a brilliant move going forward. It didn't look all that swell maybe 5 years ago, but it's looking like, well, seems like a pretty good idea right now.
Well, taking Jeff's story that I know that you heard about Cadillac maybe going to NASCAR, which is hard to believe, but all I can think of is, why did Stellantis drop the biggest money makers that they had and go this all-in thing with an electric vehicle, that an SUV that is, it's just like all the other SUVs. There really is nothing outstanding about it. Then they're putting a horsepower spin on it in an SUV. No, let's leave that to Porsche.
And we're seeing that from so many SUVs. I mean, at the Los Angeles show, we saw the introduction of a performance version of the EV9, Kia EV9. I mean, you're seeing these performance three-row SUVs. And I asked Steve Center, who is the chief operating officer of Kia America, is there a market for this? What is the market? And I don't know that we know if there is a market for this. Is there really a market for performance electric vehicles? I was driving Dodge Charger Daytona this past Thursday. I can't talk much about it, but it's kind of a head scratcher. Is the person who buys the current Dodge Charger going to be interested in that vehicle? And they're hoping yes, but I think the jury's still out. Right?
Yeah, but I think, Jack, some of them are coming to realize, particularly with Stellantis, if you look at what they did with Dodge, the Chargers, the Hellcat, the wide bodies, and all that stuff, the commercials they put out, people talked about the commercials, even if they didn't have the cars. So there is an interest there because they've sold basically every one of them they ever built. And maybe they're trying to figure out, okay, we had to go EV because we were pressured to, but we've lost our performance market. Now let's see if we can kind of pull them along with us here, because if we don't, we got to go back to building V8s.
Well, yeah, I think what they're going to have is performance EVs and kind of nothing else. Not very mundane EVs, and I don't know that the typical EV buyer. Of course, when you look going forward, they don't want just the typical EV buyer. They want the typical buyer.
Yeah,
exactly.
And to Mike's point with the commercials, they used to have commercial, does that thing have a Hemi in it?
Exactly.
Now, that thing doesn't have a Hemi in it. They should reverse that.
That thing got a battery in it?
It could be. There you go. Good marketing.
I mean, the performance is a mind blower. I can tell you that.
I will tell you this, and I believe me, I love performance, and I love what Tesla has brought to the market, especially with the Plaid. My God, I mean, I don't know of a car that can beat it at a straight line for a quarter of a mile. But why on earth would you venture down the road? I keep thinking Stellantis. Okay, now that they're a global company, it's not Chrysler anymore. What's going to happen to that company? They're bleeding money.
I think that's the problem, and it's the problem here in North America in particular, is their eyes are not on North America. I mean, they have concentrated on other markets. Kind of makes sense. Their headquarters are in another market, right? So they're not looking out the window, although North America is the number 2 market behind China. So you kind of have to pay attention to what's going on here, and they've kind of taken their eye off the ball.
But they used to have people that were focused, like the Jeep or the Ram. They had people, okay, you're in charge of North America. They had somebody designated for that. And they've kind of done away with all that. They may still have them there in name, but as far as somebody that's actually running that market, it just seems like they're just not.
Well, let me just also add to that in the fact that, we have a new president that's going to take office here in January, and he seems like a no-nonsense kind of guy. And when it comes to China, we're what's that going to be like? Let's face it, the automobile industry is kind of like it is here. They're closing shops in China because they can't build enough, sell enough cars.
Volkswagen just closed up in China. Volkswagen's moving out of China.
So there are those kinds of things that are in the tide, so to speak. And I'm not looking really positively about the American automobile industry.
Well, the auto industry as a whole, the biggest problem for the auto industry, and it has been for the last 20 years, maybe longer than that, is overproduction, the ability to build a lot more cars than there are people who can buy them. So when you combine that with lack of affordability, I mean, try and find a vehicle you want that costs, less than $25,000 or maybe even less than $30,000 in America. I mean, that's that kind of a problem. You got to sell a ton of cars. We've kind of been flatlining in terms of sales for the last couple of years. I mean, since COVID. And at the same time, there's all kinds of really interesting, cool cars being introduced. You would think that would promote higher sales rather than just kind of flatlining. But, that's what we've seen. And I think there's a lot of issues with the industry. At the same time, this is a golden time for the consumer because there's so many incentives out there. There's so many desperate manufacturers.
So what was the attendance like at the LA Auto Show? Have to ask you.
I think it was pretty strong. I think one of the things that hurts the auto shows now is the fact that most of the luxury brands just don't exhibit at auto shows anymore. And I don't know about you, but when I, as a kid going to the auto shows, or as a middle-aged man going to the auto shows, back 20 years ago, seeing all the vehicles you could buy, from the least expensive to the most expensive, from luxury cars, and sit in them, play with them, fantasize about them. That's the beauty of an auto show.
Exactly.
And we're kind of losing that when you don't have the most desirable cars or the luxury cars as part of the mix.
Who's made that decision? Is it the marketing department of the manufacturer?
Yeah, I think the marketing department is thinking, well, we don't need to have all the, populace, many of which will never buy a luxury car, soiling the seats of our luxury vehicles. What that neglects is the fact that this is where people fall in love with luxury vehicles.
The car I'm going to buy when I graduate, kind of guy.
Growing up in Detroit, going to Cobo Hall, the main thing as a kid, you have all the catalogs you're bringing home, all of the pictures, all of the ads. That was the best. I
mean, probably all of us fell in love with cars among the first times at auto shows. I grew up in Chicago. I went to the Chicago Auto Show every year with my family, and I vividly remember auto shows from way back. Let's put it that way. And they made an impression on me.
Jack, we're just about out of time. What are you going to review this week on America on the Road?
I am reviewing this week the Mazda 3 on America on the Road. We have a double hit of Mazda. The Mazda Miata and the Mazda 3 are our review cars this time around.
America on the Road, where can we find it?
You can find it on any podcast outlet. We're also on the Sports Byline Network, radio network. So we're on, something like 200 stations, I think, around the country.
Well, we wish you a very Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year. Yeah, we love you, and be safe out there in L.A.
I got one last question. When is the movie coming out for your latest book?
I wish I knew. I'd love to have that happen. Actually, I'm going to have another crime novel is going to come out probably right after the first of the year in January or February. It is called Only One Thing Stays the Same. One thing, if you got a second too, is the book behind me, the GR Factor, a management book that I wrote, I'm giving away for all of December. So all you have to do is write to editor@drivingtoday.com, editor@drivingtoday.com. Request the book, and we'll get a copy to you.
Nice.
Awesome.
Thank you, Jack.
Thank you, sir. We appreciate you. It's always great to talk to you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Love to talk to you. Merry Christmas to all.
Merry Christmas, Jack.
Thank you, Jack. Talk to you again. Hey, the holidays are here, and we hope you'll think of our show sponsors this season, including the Lupi Tortilla Tex-Mex restaurants, Pro-Am Auto, and Gulf Coast Auto Shield. We'll be back right after a quick break.
The Tex-Mex dining experience is defined by Lupi Tortilla, your destination for Texas's best beef fajitas and frozen margaritas. Since 1983, Lupi Tortilla has served authentic and time-tested recipes made with the freshest ingredients. Atmosphere is part of the award-winning experience at Lupi Tortilla, all developed in a little house near Highway 6 and I-10 in West Houston. Visit any of the Lupi Tortillas and you'll see the same attention to detail in each and every location. Start your Lupi experience with queso flamiado and guacamole, along with a classic frozen margarita. Dine on famous Lupi beef and chicken fajitas, or pepper shrimp brochette, or a fish or vegetarian entree, and finish with a scrumptious flan for dessert. Find Lupi Tortilla in Houston, College Station, Beaumont, Austin, San Antonio, and Dallas-Fort Worth. There's a Texas location near you. The recipes are authentic and time-tested. The ingredients always fresh. Lupi Tortilla, he's pretty good. Your car is a direct reflection of you, so don't be satisfied with color fade or a dingy, dull appearance. Get rid of those terrible automated car wash scratches. Gulf Coast Auto Shield is your Save the Paint company. John Gray and his team of detailing experts can help your cars finish without a full repaint. Searching for the real experts in window tint or windshield protection? Gulf Coast Auto Shield. Dash cams, radar detectors? Gulf Coast Auto Shield. Got a new car? Get that thing protected as soon as you take delivery. If you don't know which of the multitude of protection products to go with, John Gray will give you an honest opinion and won't sell you something you don't need or can't afford. John will help you understand the many options and pricing right on the spot. He's your guy to have your ride looking its best and protected too. See the state-of-the-art shop yourself. Free tours anytime. Gulf Coast Auto Shield is easy to get to, located just south of the Southwest Freeway on the Sam Houston Parkway. Gulf Coast Auto Shield, full-service luxury car care today, and online at gcautoshield.com.
It's the InWheelTime Car Talk Show. Thanks for joining us today. This is our live show on Saturday mornings between 10 and noon Central Time, and we hope you'll join us every Saturday. And if you can't, plenty of podcasts out there and reruns and whatever have you.
Yep.
Let's do the racing calendar, Jeffrey.
Well, we've got one wrapping up for Formula One. My favorite, it's going to be Etihad Airways in Abu Dhabi. It's the Grand Prix. You've got practices going on, and then, of course, the race tomorrow on Sunday. And that'll finalize Formula One. We've already got champions announcing and all that good stuff, and I say good for them. Don just handed this to me, and he wants me to go ahead and do some e-racing in the future.
The cars look really cool.
I know. Well, they look like Formula One cars and Indy cars. So we'll be talking about e-racing next week, and
Formula
also
E, yeah.
Snowball Derby. The winter race was last week, and I guess there was some controversy with accidents and crashes, and I'm going to hit you with my purse. Oh no, you're not, and all this other stuff. So, we're going to get into that as well. So look forward to tune in, subscribe.
Jeff's Racing Calendar is brought to you by the Texas Muscle Car Club Challenge, and we're going to have the head of that coming up in the next hour. So we invite you to stay tuned. Auto history, Mr. Mars.
Yes, sir. Found a few things that are interesting this time of year. December the 1st, 1928, the Duesenberg Model J debuted. On this date, Duesenberg unveiled the Model J at the New York Auto Show. Now, this car was designed to compete directly with the likes of Rolls-Royce, and the Model J was unlike anything to hit the road at that time. Before the show, they only had time to get one built, and they had it in there, and of course, the serial number was J101. Finished in silver and black, got a lot of people paying attention to it. Part of that was because it cost $8,500 back in 1928. Oh. Now, that was for the chassis alone, mind you, and the sum in 1928 equals around $175,000 in 2022 dollars for the chassis. Now, this car wore a dual cowl, and underneath that cowl was a 7-liter, 420 cubic inch Duesenberg-designed straight 8 engine.
Wow.
They advertised it at 265 horsepower, which is big at that time. It's pretty big right now. Now, it powered the car to a top speed of 91 miles an hour, and it was the most expensive production and the fastest production car of its time. Then on December the 3rd, 1979 was the last AMC Pacer.
Oh.
This car came out in February of 1975, and AMC thought they had an instant hit because they sold 145,000 in the first year of production. It was advertised as the first wide small car because it had 37% glass built into the body of it. So it's like a big fishbowl, and a lot of people called it exactly that. But like a lot of the 70s, the sales ran out of gas. There was a general lack of power. People just didn't like the fuel economy, and they couldn't compete with all the imports. So,
God, that car was ugly.
Yeah.
It's got a sunroof.
By 1979, that car was selling about $35,000 a year, and by the time they actually ended production in 1979, 280,000 were actually made. Just a little side note. A place called the Electric Vehicle Association of Cleveland offered a change of pace of model. They took the Pacers and they converted them to EVs in 1978.
Wow.
There's a big hit.
Yeah, they sold 100 of
Those
them.
taillights look familiar. They've been put those taillights on something else.
December the 1st, 1913, Ford's moving assembly line begins operation. Now, this is really important. We've talked about this a lot of times, but it was the change that he made to actually make the assembly line move so that the workers didn't have to change stations. The car came to them. Mm-hmm. And what it did, it reduced the production time from 12 hours to build a car to just 93 minutes. By moving it and keeping the people in the same place, made them much more efficient, reduced the cost, improved affordability, and that was one of the reasons so many people could afford to buy one. And, of course, it increased wages, and this bled across the entire industry, a lot of different levels. December the 3rd, this is for you, Don, 1965, Ralph Nader's Unsafe at Any Speed is published.
Actually, that first gen Corvair, no.
Yeah.
I had the second gen, thank you.
So this book was published in 1965, exposing the automobile industry's failure to prioritize consumer safety. He was saying that because it focused on style and profit over safety, particularly the Chevrolet Corvair. In fact, the Corvair was chapter 1 of the book, and the name of the chapter is The Sporty Corvair, the One-Car Accident. He argued that manufacturers deliberately ignored risk and creating these poor vehicle designs and made a lot of changes in the industry, led to congressional hearings, creation of the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration, and a lot of the safety standards, crash standards, and things that we have today are attributed back to that initial book by Ralph Nader.
Thank you, Ralph.
Well, I mean, he had a point, but...
Well, he did, but it was...
The swing axle on the Corvair killed it. And
a lot of people, too.
And a lot of people, but, that wasn't the first car ever made with a swing axle. As a matter of fact, I believe a Porsche started that.
I was about to say, Porsche was the one that created that.
Yeah. As far as stories this morning on our news headlines, and this is kind of dear to my heart for some reason, I'm not really sure. Department of Energy is racing against the clock to finalize a $335 million grant to help Stellantis overhaul its auto plant in Belvidere, Illinois. The project, expected to cost about $5 billion, but result in 4,000 jobs, has been in limbo since it was announced a year ago as part of a new contract with the United Auto Workers. The Department of Energy announced the Belvidere grant in July, but the agreement hasn't been finalized. The department is negotiating with Stellantis to wrap up the agreement by the end of the year, according to sources briefed on the matter. Once the agreement is finalized and funds are deemed obligated, it makes the money much harder to resend. Because of federal budgeting rules, if the funds were canceled after being obligated, they wouldn't count towards savings for future budgets. Come on.
Can I ask a question?
Okay.
They're getting a grant from the government to do this?
I'm sure because the government has offered it. Because it creates more jobs.
We are paying for them to...
If you knew what we pay for, you would move to another world. Not even the country. You'd move to another world. We pay for everything. So why not give them a measly $335 million? Hey, they're going to redo the Astrodome for a budget of $1 billion. Are you kidding me? $1 billion? No.
You know what we could
I
do?
love the Astrodome. I want to save it, but not for $1 billion. That's nuts.
I don't know what are you going to do with it, even for $1 billion.
I don't know, because it's going to cost millions to tear it down.
Oh, they're going to tear it down? They're not going to refurbish it?
That's the refurbishment is the $1 billion.
It's full of asbestos.
It's nuts. Okay,
Man.
we're done.
Right,
we'd love to hear from you. Shoot us an email. The address here is info@InWheelTime.com. We're back after this.
The holidays are upon us, and Pro-Am Auto Accessories is your local one-stop for the auto enthusiast on your gift list. Pro-Am Auto has been serving Houston since 1984, providing world-class products for sports cars, European sedans, and American muscle. Pro-Am was one of the very first distributors in the U.S. for brands such as Recaro, Redline, Momo, Corbeau, and Simpson. Located in the heart of Houston's premier shopping corridor, the Galleria area, Pro-Am's walk-in storefront includes an 8,000 square foot warehouse and showroom with installation and service bays. Pro-Am reaches a worldwide audience through ProAmAuto.com, taking its local reputation to the rest of the world. Holiday gift giving is alive and well at Pro-Am Auto. If you don't see what you're looking for on the website, call and Pro-Am will lend you a hand. Pro-Am Auto, 6125 Richmond at Greenridge in Houston's Galleria area. Call them at 713-781-7755. The award-winning InWheelTime Car Talk Show brings you great guest interviews each week from manufacturers and suppliers to the aftermarket, racers, enthusiasts, and other friends just like you and me who love to talk about all things automotive. The InWheelTime Car Talk Show takes it to the road, too, with remotes at popular cruise-ins and shows. InWheelTime's live video and audio stream can be found on the Odyssey radio app, YouTube, Facebook, and InWheelTime.com every Saturday, 10 to noon Central Time. Or grab a podcast anytime from your favorite podcast provider. That's it for this podcast episode of the InWheelTime Car Show. I'm Don Armstrong, inviting you to join us for our live show every Saturday morning on Facebook, YouTube, Twitch, and our InWheelTime.com website. Podcasts are available on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Stitcher, iHeart Podcast, Podcast Addict, TuneIn, Pandora, and Amazon Music. Keep listening, and we'll see you soon.